This program is part of the Devil's Mark Podcast Network, the official podcast network of Shadow Path Diabolism.
Nero and the Pig, with R.J. Womack and a pig.
Hey everybody, this is Nero.
And this is the pig.
And this is Nero and the Pig. And we're going to be talking about Cursed and Bram Stoker's Dracula today as our two things we're going to talk about. So how are you doing, Pig?
I'm doing okay, not bad. How are you doing, Nero?
I'm doing okay. I'm just a little bit tired, but, we have to get our podcast network going, so.
Yeah, got to get on with it.
Yeah, here we go. So I guess the first thing I want to say about Cursed is, did you happen to get the details of the actors' names? Because I forgot to look them all up before we started the show.
No, I didn't.
We're still learning how to be host here, people. We're incompetent.
Yeah.
Because entertainment host, Pig. Let me educate Pig. I have to teach the pig, pet him on the head, go, it's okay, Pig, we'll teach you. Entertainment hosts typically, know the names of the actors before they start a podcast about that.
I did note down one of the actors. That's all. I remember.
I thought about that after we started recording. We're not doing this very well because I didn't do my research on the actor's name.
It's more spontaneous this way. It's okay.
Okay. But anyway, the show in general is a adaptation of a graphic novel, which normal people call comic books. Those people that study and trying to make themselves sound adult. I call it comic book because that's what it is. No, but it was originally adapted from a comic book, and it's turned into a novel. I don't know where the guy found the time to turn it into a novel, but it's a novel too after the show. And the actress that plays, what's her name? It's not going.
Nimue.
Yeah, she's the one that does the voiceover. Nimue.
Right.
Just in case you're wondering, it's not that I'm going senile or having a Joe Biden moment. It's that it's been about 2 months since I watched Cursed. It's been about 2 months. So that's why I don't remember the names of all the characters. Probably not a good time to do the show. I watched the last episode or the last 2 episodes just to refresh for the show a couple of days ago. But anyway, so I'm not just having a Joe Biden moment. But anyway, getting off the subject. But anyway, the show itself is basically a telling of the story of the Lady of the Lake from her perspective. And basically she's a fae girl that becomes, I guess, immortal, and because she's part of, fae age differently in this show or something. I don't know. And apparently Merlin's a fae, and he's over 800 years old, and I don't know. Anyway, you have any comments about that part?
I thought it was interesting. I thought it was a very enjoyable program, and it is basically it's fantasy. It's fantasy, which is it's very, very loosely based off Arthurian legend. It's like they've basically just taken the characters and done whatever they want with them, basically. So it is really, really very loose.
Really loose. Yeah,
it's really loose. So but there's lots of interesting things with it. Like the way that they turn Merlin into a kind of trickster figure. Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. Because he's a very dodgy figure in this, but a very interesting one. And like you said, he's played by the guy who plays Floki in Vikings. Yeah.
And it's very much, not taking anything away from the actor himself, whatever his name is, that we don't have because we didn't do our proper prep for the show. Whatever, I forget his name, but it's not taking any away from him. It's you could tell it's almost like they said, could you bring Floki to Merlin?
Yeah,
because he even looks the same, more or less.
Yeah.
He's got the same beard. He's got the same kind of hairstyle a little bit, minus the tattoos. but it still is an interesting character. I think it's an interesting story, and I did eventually kind of forget that it's Floki after towards the end of the episodes.
Yeah,
but I think he's a brilliant actor. I just think that's what they paid him for. They wanted Floki to kind of give him that little extra star power.
Yeah, they just want.
Don't you think that too? I mean, doesn't it seem like to you he's just a Floki?
Yeah, he was a Floki-ish Merlin, definitely. You know.
Yeah. And I know the actor has got more broad skills and acting ability than that because I've seen him in other things.
Yeah.
And so I know he could have made it a completely different character. So that was a bit disappointing, but I'm glad to see that he was in it because that's kind of cool. And there are a lot of character actors in this that even if you don't know their name, you'll recognize them. A lot of people that are in fantasy and sci-fi. I mean, even because the crazy girl, the one that's the fanatical religious one, what's her name?
Iris, and that
face is so familiar. I don't know where she's from, but I know I've seen her all over the place.
Yeah, and I think she's very good at what she does, and I think she makes that character really fascinating, actually, because she's a really twisted little character, you know, and you can see there's a lot of complexity in her and some things that are quite chilling about her, and she does a very good job portraying that. And the actress's name is Emily Coates. That's the one I do remember. She
I mean, but like I said, you're right, she brings something to that character, and she, you know, it really does. You could tell they were trying to write her in such a way that she's supposed to represent like the Christian fanatics, like the evangelists, the you know, those types of Christians. And you could tell she does it really well.
No, absolutely. And I mean, another thing, the Christian fanatics, the Red Monks, I thought the Red Monks were very, very interesting as characters, and they really did portray them as like murderous fanatics or what have you. But they cut a very interesting figure and a very interesting representation of Christians, if you know what I mean, you know. So that was really interesting, you know.
And the weirdest part is, it might be a little bit exaggerated, or at least a little bit dramatic, but it's not. It's almost pale in comparison to what the Christians actually did. Yeah, that's the weirdest part. I mean, you think it's a little bit exaggerated and dramatized, but compared to what the actual Christians did and the actual Spanish Inquisition did, it's kind of mild.
Yeah, it's just made very dramatic. It's just dramatized. That's the thing. It's made very theatrical. But actually, they did do really terrible things, you know, and wreak terrible destruction. So, I was kind of glad to see that in a way, you know. I was glad to see that they presented it in that way, you know. One of the things I really liked about it, though, was that they had really good characters and really good character interaction, you know, and there was quite a bit of good humor, a very natural humor in it as well. Like I really liked Nimwe's sister Pim, and I thought the interaction between Pim and Nimue was really believable, you know, as a kind of sibling relationship, you know, with that sort of like the affection, the closeness between them, but also the banter and the making fun of each other and stuff. I really liked those relationships, and there was a lot of believable interaction in this series, I thought.
I thought so, because that's one of the things I want to point out about Netflix is they do an awesome job of comic book adaptations. They do a really awesome job of doing that, of adapting comic book material. Because I'm not a big comic book fan, and I don't like movies based on comic books. I don't like comic books, and I love their comic book adaptations. I watched Luke Cage. I watched Daredevil. I mean, I watched, you know, almost every comic book adaptation they did. I watched it and I loved it. I watched Jessica Jones, all those different things. And I just, something about the way they handled their comic book properties. I just love the way they do it. And the only superhero movie that I liked, I did like Black Panther, which I should mention that the actor that played Black Panther died this week. From colon cancer. I forget his name, but he died this week. And nobody knew he had colon cancer because he did his job and didn't say anything.
Wow. Yeah.
And pretty crazy. But I was looking forward to Black Panther 2, the sequel, and it's unfortunate that I don't know if that'll happen, and if it does happen, it's not going to have him, and it just won't be the same because he had a certain character to him, a certain, he just carried himself with that dignity, that power, that you could see in a character like that. So it's going to be very disappointing. But the reason I don't remember the actor's name is because, like I said, I'm not much of a comic book fan. But anyway, or movies adapted from comic books, so it's kind of understandable. But one of the other things I wanted to let everybody know is that Cursed has not been renewed for a second season yet. They expect that it's going to be because it had really good ratings, but they haven't confirmed it yet. And Netflix has made no announcements yet, and they think it's due in part to the COVID-19 situation, waiting until all the lockdowns are over or whatever. I don't know what's going on with that, but everybody, all the reviewers expect it to be renewed for a second season, even though they haven't announced it. And by the way, while I'm on that, Witcher has been renewed for a second season. It's just they're not going to start filming till later this year because of the COVID-19, apparently. Right. Yeah. So
that's good. That's good. One of the actors I do recognize from this was an Icelandic actor called Olafsson, who played one of the Shadow Lords. You know that Leper King that when he went down. Yeah. I love that actor. He's great. Yeah, and I would have liked to know more about what the Shadow Lords actually were. Because they didn't really tell you much about them, did they? No, they were really interesting. But I mean, that whole section with Merlin going down to see, like the Leper King and all of his people, that was really interesting because it seems to suggest that he was going almost like down into the land of the dead or something. There was a lot of
like it was the underworld.
Yeah. And even just the thing that the Leper King, he looked sort of like so extraordinary. He was like half diseased and half handsome, and he had all these jewels, and he had one eye was a jewel, and that was just all those associations were very Plutonic. It was very much like Pluto or something as well.
Yeah, no, I noticed that right away as soon as it started. It was almost like a devil sort of figure.
Yeah, I really was interested in that, and I was interested in this idea of who the Shadow Lords were, and more. I wanted to see more of him and more of his people and everything, and what was the story behind that. That really interested me, And
it had nothing. It had nothing to do with him being a bear and a beard and a.
No, of course not. No.
Nothing like that.
No.
For those of you who don't know, Pig is a bear himself, and he loves bears, and he anytime he gets to see a man with a beard, he'll rate the show highly no matter what the content is.
You just have to really, yeah. And Oliver Olafsson is particularly good, so yeah.
It's kind of funny because I'll be like, have you watched this show yet so we can review it? No. Have you watched this show so we can review it? No. And I noticed there's one thing that all the shows have in common, that they don't have any hairy men in them. They all have pretty girls in them. And let me tell you something about Pig. If it's a show that has beautiful women in it, he's not interested. He'll put that on his queue of reviewable material for the show. He'll put that at the bottom, and you won't get review. And if the men are cleanly shaved and like handsome, he doesn't like that. So he puts that at the bottom of his pile. Anything that's got hairy men in it comes to the top of the pile. So I'm like, have you reviewed the latest season of Lucifer? No. Why not? Too many girls and too many clean-shaven men in it. I know, it's not interesting. Yeah.
But I do like I like the strong female characters. Like I love Maze from Lucifer, So yeah, I like the really strong female characters. But I don't really notice if they're beautiful or not, particularly. That's the thing.
Yeah. Of course you wouldn't notice that anybody's beautiful. They're not. But if the woman had a beard and long hair and hairy armpits, you'd probably notice.
That'd be okay,
Yeah, exactly. You'd probably start liking her again. But anyway. Yeah, so before we get on to Dracula, I want to talk about the one scene that we just totally hated.
Oh, yeah. This might be a bit of a spoiler though. Do you want to because I mean,
yeah, but we've already spoiled everything because we didn't put our spoiler alert up before we started the show. There's another thing professional reviewers know, you say, spoiler alert, if you have not seen the series, do not listen any further. That's what you say before you start talking about this stuff.
Well, I tell you what, there is a way to just describe it without actually giving away the story. Yeah. And I think that's just to say that there was this one scene at the end where the Morgana character somehow manages to pull something off, and save the day at this very crucial scene
moment.
Only it's just the actual thing that she has to do to pull this off is completely glossed over, and she just says, "Oh yeah, I did so and so." Once it's done, and it's like, you know, it was just like, it was almost as if, well, there's a plot hole there. So what we'll do is we'll just get her to explain it afterwards. Yeah.
Right. And it's just lazy writing. I mean, not that I'm any expert in, fiction writing or anything, but I'm just saying, it's bad writing.
No, I know. And that was a shame, because it's like, it stood out like a sore thumb, because most of it is very well done. And that was just like, did you just forget? Did you forget a scene or something and then realize afterwards? It was, I mean, it was almost as if they just sort of like forgotten a scene and then realized afterwards, and they just basically got the actress to sort of like just tell you what had happened, It was terrible. It was terrible. It's just a shame, because it stuck out so much, whereas most of it was really good, and that was just really, if it wasn't a mistake, it was just really, really lazy. I can't understand why they did that, because all they need to do was just film a very short scene. All they need to do was just film 10 or 20 seconds of a scene to show you what had happened, basically. And that would have done it, but I don't know. I think they really misjudged that.
Yeah, I do too. Absolutely. Yeah. I think it was awful what they did. I think like I said, I don't understand why people do that. I mean, I suppose if you're under a time crunch and you're trying to get something done on deadline and stuff, I mean, you might just plug a plot hole with something, Yeah. But
it would have taken so little just to show something there, and it would have explained it all. It would have explained the bridge. That would have made it credible what happened next.
Yeah. Okay. There's one thing I did want to say, which is, we got about 10 minutes because we were going to make these 30-minute episodes. So but we got a little bit more. We got about 12 minutes. So, so we should get on to Dracula. Right. Talk about Dracula. Now, this is the classic Bram Stoker's Dracula from 1992. And for all you young diabolists out there who really, really don't understand what good movies are. No, I'm just kidding. The one thing I will say before we start, spoiler alert, if you have not seen the film, you probably do not want to hear this. So I think it's become a classic film. The only thing I will say is that some of the effects, you could tell this was the early 90s, and they look very dated now. But the film itself, if you consider the time period with which it was filmed, the makeup is pretty good. All the stuff they did was pretty good, and the acting. Well, we'll talk about that. But anyway, so you want to give your first impressions?
It's my favorite Dracula movie. Basically, I think it's wonderful. I think the acting is great. Gary Oldman is just a fantastic Dracula. You can tell he really put his heart into the role. I think Winona Ryder did a good job as well. Winona Ryder did a good job. I mean, it was just it's a great interpretation of it. On one point on the effects, Francis Ford Coppola actually deliberately used very, very retro effects. He used the most low-tech effects he could get. Yeah. So you see they do look extremely dated, but that was partly actually deliberate on his part.
That was intentional. I didn't know that.
Yeah. I mean, so you got all those weird things, like, the way that one scene would fade into another by as if it was a lens closing down and opening up or what have you.
No, I understood that part. I was talking about the light in the background, the blue lights at the castle, the circular.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, but I think that was deliberate, and also, like, for instance, just running the film backwards to get really unnatural movements and things like that.
No, I thought that was cool. I thought that was cool.
Yeah, yeah, but I really loved some of the way he did some of the effects. Like, for instance, Dracula's shadow wouldn't match his movements at times, so it gave you this sense of something really, really unnatural.
And I'll tell you something else too about that. I mean, there's a lot of little things that I don't think you noticed the first time you watched it, but I've probably watched that film like 15, 20 times. My lifetime.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of little things you pick up on your subsequent watches, viewings of the film that you didn't quite pick up on before.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like the subtle movements and things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And the whole cinematography and the whole way everything is colored with the filters he uses. I mean, it just looks like it looks almost hallucinogenic, at times. It looks like a sort of nightmarish dream, when they're going through like the countryside in Transylvania or wherever it is, and you've got the sun setting and the sky just looks absolutely red or orange or what have you, or you've got purples and all sorts of different things,
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think for as old as it is, it stands up really well, I think.
Yeah. No, I think it does. I mean, a lot about the film was very deliberate on the part of Francis Ford Coppola, and I think that's something that you have to take that as just as read sort of thing. So the colors are really saturated, the effects are very old fashioned, and he uses things which seem more like stagecraft at times than CGI, for instance, or things like that, which is something that I like. I like that kind of thing, I really do. But the other thing is that the whole approach to the thing was very unique, and I think really, really good, because it's something that I'd noticed, because the way that Dracula movies have approached their subject has changed throughout the 20th century. Like early 20th century, it was very much a horror thing. If you look at the early Nosferatus or what have you, there was nothing sexy about them. They were just horror, just horror figures, And then as you go through like the 50s and 60s, it gets a bit more campy, and it gets a bit more, it gets a little bit more magnetic and sexy as well. As you go on through these films, you get to the 70s, and it becomes much more psychological. It becomes much more about repressed sexuality and all sorts of things. And so, but it's still very much about sexuality. But with this one, it's different. This one, it's really about love. This one, it's about love and love.
That's denied. What I love about it. I mean, what I love about this film is that it's about somebody loving somebody so much that they would basically call on the powers of darkness themselves.
Yeah.
To preserve their soul so they could be reunited with their soulmate. And I think that's as a religious person, as someone who believes in the power of darkness and powers of darkness and stuff, it just really affected me, which will bring us to the way it ends, which is, to me, just ruins the whole film. But anyway,
yeah. I mean, it is. I can see what he was trying to get at. The thing is, the way it ends, he brings it back to almost to a Christian kind of thing, doesn't he? In a way,
because he brings it that God forgives Dracula and everything. He's full in harmony,
and it becomes a sort of redemption thing. It becomes redemption through sacrifice kind of thing. I mean, but the wonderful thing about it is that it's all so much of the film is about love and betrayal and about immortality, and it's about something very pure which gets twisted by tragedy, But then,
one of my favorite scenes in that movie. I mean, there's tons of them, but one of my favorite scenes in that movie is when she's like, when Winona Ryder's doing the voiceover, and she's like, "Lucy's a pure and virtuous girl," And, and then she says, I wish I was so adored as such as she, right? And then his shadow comes over and he's talking Romanian and he's like calling her his love and, and that kind of thing. To me, that scene is just so powerful because here she is thinking she's just this common girl. Like she'll never match up to her rich friend. And here's this creature almost that's lived all this time just to find her.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's the wonderful thing. It's like, I know for me, you were always you were rooting for them to get together and for them to just be together forever, if you know what I mean, Yeah. So, and as she's being transformed at a certain point and they're on their way back to Transylvania, I mean, you want them to be together and you want her to become a vampire and you want them to be like, live wickedly ever after. Live wickedly ever after or what have you. But it's like I like the fact that, he becomes a noble figure in that way. He becomes a noble figure that's hunted, and she sticks by him. And it's only at the end that this thing happens. And, well, it's like you can take it whichever way you want to, the way it goes. It's kind of disappointing in a way, but that's just the way the film goes,
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Is that the way the original book went? Because I don't think I've ever read to the end of the original book.
I haven't actually. I haven't.
That's something we should really do. We should go through and read the original Frankenstein.
Yeah.
And the original Dracula and review it on this podcast.
Yeah, actually, that would be interesting. Yeah,
I think it would be. So I think we'll make that as one of our plans for a future episode.
Yeah. Yeah.
So do you have any final thoughts about the film or anything you want to leave off with?
It's just how much I loved Gary Oldman's portrayal. I mean, all of his faces of Dracula in that film, whether it was like the very old Dracula in the castle, who was extraordinary, just the things that Gary Oldman did, like the way he licked the blood off a razor at one point, and it was extraordinary. It was almost obscene. He almost
I know it was. Yeah,
it's like he shuddered. You could see him shudder as he licked this blood off the razor blade, and he did it furtively, and then gave the razor back to the Keanu Reeves character.
Yeah, and I love the subtle. I love the subtle thing about when he's shuffling the letters, his movements are almost animalistic.
Yeah,
and just that subtle movement, the way he moved his hands, like with that bestial kind of movement. Yeah, I thought it was fucking brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, it was just amazing. So he was that, and then you remember when he was almost like the werewolf-like character.
Yeah.
When he was like, like ravishing Lucy or what have you. I thought he was extraordinary just as that, and all he did was like look up, and it's just you saw him look at her, and he just says, "Don't see me," or "No, see me," or what have you, and you just see this. You just see this desperation in his eyes, like "Don't see me like this,"
Yeah.
And then when he was the young Dracula, when he was in London, and he was the young Dracula, and he met he met his love. And he was taking her to the place where the film show was and everything.
Yeah, the cinematograph.
Yeah, I mean, he was just every face of Dracula he just portrayed so exquisitely.
I agree. I mean, I think he did a brilliant job, and like I said, considering how old that film is, it's pretty amazing that it's held up the way it does. And I think as I watch it, I love it more because I notice little subtle things.
Yeah.
And if you haven't seen it, guys, and you like Dracula, I really think you should give it a watch. And in fact, if you're younger and you haven't seen that many Dracula films, compared to the films that are out there nowadays with all the CG and all that stuff, I really think it's an awesome film, and it gets back to the heart of the story of Dracula the way it was originally intended, I think. Oh, and we didn't mention, who we didn't mention? We didn't mention what's his name? Dr. Van Helsing.
Andrew.
What? My mind's going like, what's his name? Golly.
I don't know.
I forgot his name. Anthony Hopkins.
Anthony Hopkins. That's it. Yeah, Anthony Hopkins. Yeah.
Oh my God, he plays such a great character.
Yeah, he plays him as a complete nutcase, doesn't he? He's like he's just this crazy eccentric character who is just determined to destroy Dracula, you know. And that's another thing that came out. You know, like from the 1970s onwards, Van Helsing appears almost as a fanatic in a lot of the portrayals. Yeah. Which is kind of nice. So he almost is the Christian fanatic, if you see what I mean. And you always end up at a certain point where you're rooting for Dracula and you're thinking, God, just run from that guy. He's mad, you know, like the Van Helsing, you know. Yeah.
So so that about wraps it up for this episode. But I guess we will both say that we highly recommend both Cursed and Dracula, a 1992 version by Francis Ford Coppola. So if you haven't seen them, give them a watch and let us know what you think. Let us know what you think about the shows. We will be putting up a page or something for Nero and the Pig, maybe a Facebook page or something. I haven't decided yet. You see, the podcast network is in its early stages, and I haven't quite figured out what we're going to do or what social media we're going to do or whatever. And since I'm kind of the guy responsible for coming up with the plan, I haven't come up with a plan yet. So bear with me. By the time this podcast gets out there, hopefully we'll have something. But yeah, when we do have a social media imprint, we'll let you know and let us know what you think. And until then, I guess you could always tell us what you think at #ShadowPathDiabolism on Twitter.
Yep, do that.
That's #ShadowPathDiabolism. Okay, all right, that's it for me. You have anything else you want to say?
No, that's it. All done.
So I take it you give it 2 hoofs up?
2 hoofs up. Yep, definitely.
All right. Well, we'll see you later. Bye, guys.
Bye.